All righty, man. It's already September 5th. September, February 5th. I'm laughing at myself this morning. Time doesn't mean anything that much anymore. We've been talking about the 10 utterances or the 10 sayings or the 10 guidelines in Exodus chapter 20. And so I'm sure you've all thought about what we've been talking about. But before we get started and start digging deep to see what we hear and to hear what we see in our discussion today, are there any questions or comments about anything at all? Nobody wants to talk about the weather? Usually that's how conversations start a lot. How's the weather down there? My dad used to always ask, how's the weather?
It is cold in DC.
I'll bet. All right. Well, you know what? If there are no comments or questions, specific questions, let's go ahead and get started. The last saying we talked about related to Sabbath. And there was a question, I thought of a question that nobody asked, and so I'll ask you the question, and you tell me what you think about it. We talked about the Sabbath, and we talked about historically what the Hebrew perspective was, or the Jewish perspective is of the Sabbath. And we talked about God's requirement to remember the Sabbath, to keep it holy. Jewish people have lots of different things that they do in order to not only remember the Sabbath, that it represented and reminded them of Elohim's creation in 6 days, and on the seventh day it rested. But it also reminded them of their being brought out of slavery in Egypt, or servitude in Egypt. And so there are specific things that they do then for that second portion that relates to keeping the Sabbath, to be mindful of it and not working. Here's my question. Are we bound by those same kinds of things today? Are we bound by on the Sabbath day of doing nothing, ceasing from work completely? How does that relate to us today? What is our responsibility today?
Jesus told us that.
Go ahead, sir.
Jesus said that the Sabbath was made for man. Man was not made for the Sabbath, because the disciples were accused of working on the Sabbath when they ate from that cornfield. So what he was saying in essence is that you have the Sabbath it does not mean that you're not supposed to do anything. And the reason I know he's saying that is because he said, if a man's oxen falls in a ditch on the Sabbath, does he leave him there, or does he get him out? So our responsibilities for Sabbath is what it has always been, and that is to remember the seasons, or to cease what we are doing daily, in order for us to be able to remember the principles that we were given to follow in order for us to effectively be what we were created to be, and that is Elohim.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? It was really difficult for the Israelites to keep those 613 laws, guys, and that's why sacrifices were even built into that, knowing that they wouldn't be able to live up to that, or knowing that they probably wouldn't be able to live up to that. So the sacrifices were built in as a means for them to atone for breaking whatever law they happen to break. But what if we had to do a sacrifice for every time we miss the mark, if you will? Every time we got entangled in something and had to have a specific sacrifice. So that's part of what Jesus did too. We don't have to labor. In other words, in order to cease. That, if that resonates, we don't have to labor in order to justify ourselves in Elohim's sight anymore. So,
Ms. Barbara.
Yes, sir.
I guess to support what you're saying and what Pastor is saying, when you get to digging and looking at remember, one of the things that says about it is a monument. So if you're looking at this literally, that can get into idolatry. You know, if you don't understand from that perspective that this is a spiritual thing, it's not necessarily something that you should idolize or worship on this day. It's far more than that.
Thank you, Ron. Very interesting point. And I think as we begin to go after we get through honoring your father and your mother, and we start on the second tablet, we're going to see exactly what you're talking about in terms of it's not the actual doing of the thing; it's even the thought of doing the thing, and that's where we are in terms of being image bearers of Elohim. We've got to not even, as much as possible, give life to the thoughts that would lead us down a path of law breaking.
Barb, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Audrey. Good morning.
Good morning.
I know in the past when we've spoken about this, we mentioned that and discussed the fact that the Sabbath was never closed like the other days. Like it said the morning and evening of that day, and it was closed, but the Sabbath day was never closed. So in a way, it doesn't make sense that we still interpret it as laboring 6 days and resting on the seventh, because it's still Sabbath. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense in terms of the fact that we don't have to labor and cease, because we can do it internally at any given time.
Yeah, and the point you're making is the point that Pastor made when he first talked about this a little bit ago. That is a continual thing for us now. We live this. We don't just observe it, we live it. And the living it is as you live. That once you have your ducks in a row, in other words, you know who you are, you know what your purpose is, you learn to balance those things, whether it's work, literally work, the job that you do, or whether it's whatever it is. There's a balance that we learn that we don't, that is a continual kind of thing. And when we live from a sense of balance, and we are centered, and when living from a sense of balance means we always understand who the Most High is and who we are, that we are the image bearers, and that we have a responsibility as an image bearer to do the functions of Elohim. Because, again, if you remember what I said also about Hebrew thinking, in a sense, is not what something looks like. It is what's his purpose, what's his function, what's his action, what's his thought. And if we're image bearers, that is the continual thing that we carry as being created in the image to function toward that end. So thank you for your observations, others.
Bob,
Yes, sir.
in Genesis, it says that every time it says that, and God saw that it was good, it says, and the evening and the morning were the blah, blah day, whether it's first, second, or third day, the evening
Right.
and the morning.
Right.
If it was the evening and the morning, then even if you were to do it, it would last as long as it's being done now, because if it's evening and morning, it would last overnight. That would be it.
Precisely. And
So-
that's why.
Go ahead.
And that's why Jesus is Lord over the Sabbath. If you're Lord over the Sabbath, that means you have authority over the rules and regulations that guide whatever the Sabbath rules and regs were. And being Lord over the Sabbath meant that there are some other things that he reset the rules in a sense. And he says this is not a one-day thing. This is a continual thing. That's in essence what it says. But you don't have to continue to do these sacrifices, these physical sacrifices. But we've got to do the spiritual work. The spiritual work is not letting these evil thoughts or ideas not give them life. When we don't give them life, they don't live. So it's a continual thing.
I
Anybody
think,
else?
yes, ma'am, it's Ron. I just listened to what you and Pastor are saying. I think we glean something from creation every time we talk about it and look at it, and it's really telling us how to go back to the beginning and what we are to pull from it, because that's always stood out to me, that it says the evening and the morning and not the morning and the evening. Not we think of your day starting, you get up early in the morning and that's the start of my day. But he's saying the evening and the morning. And if you look at that, the wholeness of what is being said, I suppose anyway, that is saying that if you learn how to be a creator, if you learn how to return to beginning, then the darkness in your life should be minimized. You may have some moments of uncertainty being the evening, but if you learn to be creator, the enlightenment comes to you, which says a lot, I guess. And if you look at it and from day 1, day 2, day 3 on up until the Sabbath, to me, it's telling us how to return to beginning and what we can expect if we don't let things overwhelm us.
Thank you, Ron. Anybody else? Thank you very much for the comments, guys. And from this point on, I think as we go through all of these other sayings, one of the things we have to remember is, what does that mean for us right now? Because if you think about the first 4 sayings, they're all about the Creator and our relationship and what we should do as it relates to that. No, don't make any false idols, because we are the image bearers. Don't lift up that name just for vain things and frivolous things. Be intentional about our thoughts about the Creator. And then we just started talking about remembering the Sabbath and the fact that there has to be a balance, a balance in us. We have to live from that balance, and we have to make decisions from that balance. We have to act from balance. So that's just a reminder to me that it's a melding. The Sabbath is an opportunity to meld the upper worlds and the lower worlds, in a sense, because that's where we live from. And we're getting ready to get into honor your father and mother, because this one seems to be a little bit transitional. And many might think, well, if you're talking about your own father and mother, why is that it on the second tablet? Because that seems to be where we talk about relationships between humans and humans. And our father and mother are humans, are they not? So let's get into that just a little bit and see how that relates. Let me just read that. The saying says, honor your father and your mother, that you may long endure on the land that the Lord your God is assigning you. And then the next interpretation of that saying is by Jeff Benner, who wrote his translation of the Torah. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days will be long upon the ground which Yahweh, your Elohim, is giving you. So let's delve into this a little bit and see what we hear, see what we see. Honor is derived from a word K-A-B-E-D, kabed, and it's from a root word meaning weighty, respect, importance, reverence, dignity. All of those things relate to honor. So it says that we need to pay that respect and that reverence and understand the importance of our father and our mother, and treat them with dignity and respect, not only when it feels good, but at all times. Not only when we want to, but at all times. Mother comes from a word, EYM, that means strong water giver. And then another rendition of it is one who binds the family together. And that comes from what the Hebrews did when they made glue by boiling animal skins in water. And then the fat from that floated to the top, and it's in that residue that floated to the top that was sticky, and they used it as glue. And so the root of this also is binds. So putting that all together, the mother is the strong the strong water also came from the fact that everything, the mother, Eve was the mother of all life. And when a fetus is formed, when a baby is formed, it's formed in the umbilical fluids. Then, so putting all this together, strong water giver, one who binds the family together. That's what mother is. Questions, comments, additional comments? And I understand that from some of our sources, we may get some different, I guess, examples and meanings of this, but it will all, please share, because it all will conform and relate to this concept and definition of mother.
Mother, Mem, is the center. It's in the middle of all the letters, and that is at the beginning, which is the out of which everything came, and the Mem is said to hold the universe together. The feminine energy is what holds it together. So whatever the letters mean or whatever they form is as a result of them emanating from the source that holds all of them together, and that is the Mem that's in the center of all of the letters. And that is one of the major reasons it is absolutely necessary to recognize recognize the essence of what mother is, not just someone who gave physical birth, but it is indicative of the image of the energy that holds things together. And if we look at that from the perspective of how we live now, we begin to see that is the reason that everything is falling apart, because there is no feminine energy in it. And in addition to that, we have been taught as males in this earth not to respect the feminine energy as a source that holds everything together, but a source of weakness that is indebted to masculinity, because masculinity is supposed to provide and protect it. However, we've gotten it twisted, because the roles that we play, all of them are equally important for our continued existence, and for us to be able to be the manifestation of Elohim. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Pastor. You just summed up honor your father and your mother. Well, let's move on to the next. Thank you for that observation. As a matter of fact, the letters that make up, the Hebrew letters that make up mother are Aleph and Mem. So it's all related to the binding together and the holding together. And you're thank you very much for that observation. Without the mother, and without our keeping the mother in front of our face as what it is that spiritually she provides, the family falls apart. Father is Av, and it means strong leader, protector of the house, strength of the house. So, got that in your minds then. Binder of the family, protector of the house, the leader, strong leader, strength of the house. That's who we are honoring.
What's missing in that, Barbara?
And what do you mean what's missing? The child? Who's honoring? What do you ask?
man, Abba, do Father again. The strength.
Father is the strong leader, protector of the house, strength of the house. So,
Right.
and also the provider. That's the Father
Right.
is the provider as well.
Isn't that strange that you don't hear dominator, manipulator, controller, head of?
Here, I hear you. It's like we have taken that and twisted it in terms of its interpretation today to make it what we want it to be. Other comments? You see what Pastor the concept he was trying to present, the fact that we define Father in so many different ways today, and they weren't these strong leaders. Strength of the house, protector of the house, provider. Comments, questions? Not, moving on. And if the question hits you later, hey Nick,
Hey,
if the question hits you later, I got you. I'm just making a comment for everybody. If the question hits you later after we pass, ask it anyway. Thank you, Nick. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was gonna actually, you might be getting to this, but the second part of that is and well, if you honor your mother and father, you will have a longer life. I wanted to comment on that next, unless you are about to get to that. Okay.
No, please do.
So whenever we look at the sort of contents of the Old Testament, and especially the Ten Commandments, and we relate them to spiritual principles that sort of give us form and allow us to sort of navigate our internal space so that we can figure ourselves out and grow spiritually. As we all know, it's said that people way back in the day used to live longer than we do now. And I believe that when we see, when we hear the mention of having long life, or you have a the number of days that you have in the earth will be extended if you honor your mother and father, it is spiritually speaking about the masculine and feminine principles within us individually, and also between us collectively, that create a state of harmony that allows for life to continue longer than if that state is chaotic, either internally or collectively between us. And I believe that it's talking about when you can identify those masculine and feminine principles within the mother and father, and you can learn to balance them within and without, then it produces a state of harmony that allows life to continue for longer than it would if we were sort of out of balance with those principles, and in other ways not paying attention to them, or not sort of realizing the ways in which we need to balance ourselves. And hopefully that's not redundant, but and I believe that that particular commandment is not only talking about what we may think immediately, which is the sort of physical relationships to our own parents that we have, but the internal spiritual relationships that we have to the principles that form and inform us.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Thank you, Nick.
What would you say
some of the masculine, feminine principles?
So when we usually think of masculinity, we typically think of like leadership and other maybe stereotypical things. But in terms of how both of those are represented in us, it actually kind of is that. So a masculine principle that we learn how to balance within ourselves is the one of consciously choosing a direction and then heading in that direction. And that could be related to your life, to your just whatever aspect of your own experience that requires a single focus and a movement in that direction, a movement towards that focus. One of the representations of the masculine principle is the straight line, geometrically. And I'm sure you could imagine why. But that is the principle of finding the path of least resistance between where you are now and, for example, where you want to be. And that could apply to any aspect of your life. And then moving in that direction. And that's an example of the masculine principle. For the feminine principle, geometrically represented by the curve or the circle, that is the, as I mentioned, the seemingly stereotypical aspect of nurturing or gathering and building. But applied to our spiritual development, that's the learning to cultivate those sort of new aspects of self we become aware of when we move in a particular direction as a result of employing the masculine principle. So it's like a moving and then learning to rest and build, moving and learning to rest and build. And it's the proper balance between those two things, those two abilities that we have as applied to any aspect of our lives or experience that we realize we need to apply them, that creates that state of harmony, which allows for longer days, both literally in the sense of living longer, and the sort of spiritual source of living longer, which is a more harmonious communication and ability to draw from spirit in our lived experience.
What you said reminded me of the Sabbath in a sense, and you said moving and then what did you call it? Moving and then.
So yeah, moving and then just resting.
It reminded me of the Sabbath, which is working, action, and resting. Action and resting. So anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know who asked the question, but did you want to follow up, or did Nick answer your question so that you understand?
It was Kathy. It's good. I thank you.
Okay, Cal. Thanks. So,
Bob,
I'll create it.
this is Ron.
Go ahead, Ron.
I hear what Nick is saying. I was just going to say what he describes to me, or describing to me, is if we can understand and grasp those concepts, you understand the two sides of who you are internally. You have a balanced, harmonious relationship with self, meaning your masculine and feminine side, and which, it talks about life, takes you to a deeper place rather than this earthly existence. It's talking about far more than that. So, it's honor your father and your mother, but that is what brings about that balance in you that leads you to understand who you are and who we are spiritually, and what it means to be Elohim. That just kind of it kind of summed up everything we talked about. You mentioned the Sabbath. It just really summed up everything we talked about so far.
Exactly. I mean, and you can see how it builds. One thing builds on the if you understand and you know who the Creator is. One thing, it's like an argument that is no argument. It just builds on the truth of the foundation. Pastor, you were going to say something?
Yes, in regards to father and mother, masculine and feminine. The scripture says that when the human was when the human was created, the human was unaware or without a complement to it, and it could not find one. Therefore, the human was introduced to femininity, the feminine energy, in order to complement it, which is saying that it's not to dominate it, it's to complement it. And the masculine and feminine energy complements each other. As Nick was saying, it does it spiritually, and in doing so spiritually, that's what brings us balance. And if we look at that in our everyday life, then even right now, when you are responding to a question, the question is raised. That means the womb is open, and the response is given, and the seed is placed in that womb, and from that comes an understanding or an embracing of who we are, and that's what's birthed from that seed, if that's what your desire is. All of that, what we are talking about the spirituality of the feminine and masculine, is manifest in the human, in the earth. And that is the reason I asked you to go over that again, because it is the masculine body has dominant masculine energy in many cases, and because of it, it becomes a manifestation of what the spiritual is saying. And in doing so, that in itself creates balance. If we are unable to live in harmony with each other based upon gender or anything else for that matter, but in this particular case, we're talking about masculine and feminine energy. If we are unable to balance that, then we can forget about having balance in any other part of our lives. The idea of how we respond to each other in a physical way speaks very deeply to how we are responding to ourselves internally in a spiritual way. That aspect that I'm expressive of, or what is representative of the feminine energy, is indicative of the respect that is internal that I have for the one who created me, as well as for the essence that I was created with. So all of these things are intertwined, and they are inextricably tied together, and all of them are manifested in this physical place called Earth. Thank you.
Thank you. If you remember, this is utterance number 5 on the first tablet. And so what we're saying is that this is sort of the glue, if you will, that connects these two tablets. Because once you have, as we say, an understanding of the spiritual meaning of honoring your father and your mother, then that carries over into the physical, where if you've got a good relationship, you've got harmony, you've got the children who respect their parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It makes for better family relationships, and not only better family relationships, I think Nick alluded to this, better neighbors to each other, a better society, a better world. You see it all connects. The Creator has both the masculine and feminine attributes, and that's the way that the human was created in its image. And that includes the mother and father of the human. We all were children, in a sense. And our parents, in partnership with God in creation, brought us into being. Without them, without parents, without mother and father, we have nothing. We owe them our respect and our honor. They gave us life physically. But we understand that more than that, spiritually, the one who created all gave us life. So this is the Creator's way of using the mother and father to manifest a spiritual principle in a physical way. Because the mother and father, from them we learn respect, we learn limits. They show us God. They are God to us in a sense. Just like Moses was God to the people. But for a child, that's who the mother and father are. They are the authority. We learn respect for authority. And we're taught to obey our parents generally. Now I know this is not the same for every single family, but generally that's the expectation, that our parents represent the God in the life of the small child, the authority in the earth. So to honor our parents reflects honoring the Creator. This utterance not only speaks to the spiritual relationship with Elohim as father, mother, giver of life, provider of all that we need. It also speaks to the basics of all social relationships. Like I just said, if we have these things balanced, it speaks to human relationships with each other too. If we come from a household where we have respect for authority, then the child goes to school and does not and has respect for the teacher, respect for the older adult, respect for other individuals, because in a family where there's respect for father and mother, there's also taught respect among the siblings for each other. So all of this is part of the basics of nurturing this child and imbuing or putting in it the essence of the function of what it is to be in a relationship with a mother and father and others. So the basic family of children, honoring mother and father, reflects our relationship with our Creator. So build into this relationship, we then learn to respect our neighbors, our community, our society, that kind of thing. Honoring parents is lifelong. It's not a nice thing to do. We're commanded to do it. That's what part of the utterance is. And the promise for this is long life. Disrespecting parents results in Nick's already talked about this, the judgment and the shortened life. So in honoring our father and our mother, we honor the masculine and the feminine energy that we are, both of which are essences of the Creator that we need to have a balanced spiritual life and physical life. We've all of this has already been said, but it's just that you guys got to it before I got to it. There's someone who was going to make a comment or a question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Audrey. In regards to the masculine and feminine energy and finding the balance of that within ourselves, and then the mother-father aspect of things, does that apply also to physically? And I mean, in terms of nature, we speak of Mother Earth. I'm not sure what the father side would be in terms of
I've heard
Earth.
Father Time, but that doesn't mean anything.
But does
Yes, it does. It does.
those
It does
principles
because
extend
nature.
to nature?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Nature should mirror spiritual. Yes.
Yeah. Different cultures sort of conceptualize of different aspects of nature as the masculine or feminine. Like I think the Egyptians thought of when you look up at the night sky, that was feminine, and the earth was masculine. But it just depends on the particular, I guess, maybe approach that a culture or spiritual tradition took. But the principles were always the same in terms of the relationship and the need to balance them. And let me add, not to go off on another huge tangent, I hope, but that is why in any sort of religious setting, if you intuitively or obviously see that setting is restrictive to or controlling of or rejecting of women, then that setting is not connected to the creator. And one thing I want to say is that, generally speaking, religion, or the institution of religion, and the sort of traditional settings that we think of when we say religious settings, are not compatible with spirituality. And that is why they often try to control and limit the influence of women and the feminine principle. Because another characteristic of the feminine principle within all of us is the ability to be sort of intuitively receptive to spirit. And if in a religious setting, you can't have people being intuitively aware of what truth is if you are trying to maintain a certain rigid hierarchy or rigid attachment to a set of rules that they made up. Basically, you can't have people questioning you and asking questions about what you're doing based on their own intuitive sense of what is right and wrong. And women will always point out what is wrong because they're better at intuitively sensing when something is wrong. And you can't have that. And that sort of pattern repeats itself everywhere that the men in charge have failed the mother principle within themselves. And if not wholly rejected it, have limited it and placed it in a box for egotistical reasons. And that always produces chaos. So anytime you encounter or see restriction or rejection of feminine principle, the men doing that have essentially lost their spiritual minds. And they cannot produce anything that gives life and enlightenment. They can only repeat a pattern of rules that they have created out of ignorance of the true nature of law, spiritual law, out of ignorance of the true nature of the commandments and what they mean for us in terms of spiritual development, harmony, and enlightenment. And until that femininity, both within them and sort of collectively within whatever that religious setting is accepted, then it will produce spiritual stagnation, which is the closest thing you can get to death in an actual sense. And it will go nowhere, and it will repeat itself for forever, because you can't grow without the proper balance between male and female. I'm done.
I wonder.
Gotcha, Nick. Go ahead, Pastor.
I wonder if we really heard what Nick just said.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder. Because every one of us have been a party to it, as well as experiencing it. We grew up in it and didn't realize it. Regardless of how sincere the people were, we still are. The stagnation emanates from and
Pastor, can you speak up a little bit, please?
sure, the stagnation emanates from leadership. And I remember when we walked away from Sunday school books many, many years ago. It simply was because they were not messages from God as we saw it then and stated it that way. They were stories that made no sense whatsoever. And they continuously repeated themselves every 5 years. And as a result of that, there was absolutely no growth. And then we asked the question, why is it that people come to the altar with the same problems day in and day out, year after year, month after month, whatever? Why is that? It's simply because the environment has been created for that purpose. And in reality, when people come to the altar, they are not coming to be free from anything by the God that created us. The deliverance, the expectation of it does not exist. If the expectation existed, then it would happen at some point. It appears as though the stagnation is perpetuated by virtue of the leadership doing the same thing, the same ways over and over again. And when I say the leadership, it does not matter who leaves or who dies or who stays. Nothing ever changes. Some of us have not been in a setting like that for years, especially Nick. And you can walk into that setting and know everything that's going to happen and what's going to be said. And I emphasize this because it is imperative that we see the power that has been lorded over us and still being lorded over people. I think what Nick said is extremely important in describing the settings that are in existence for the time being, but beginning to slowly fall apart. And later maybe I'll speak more to that. But now, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pastor. Any other comments right now?
Father John, I have a comment, not quite in that line, but something kind of hit me when I was listening to some point of this. I can't remember, but the masculine and feminine image. I think it was Nick that talks about the movement and the rest. And I want to talk about the rest. So I just mentioned it for a minute and see if this makes sense. I hope this isn't confusing. And if so, somebody help me with it. But it reminded me of looking at the patriarchs, whether you're talking about Abraham and Sarah, or Isaac and Rebekah, or Jacob and Rachel and Leah. All of them, if you notice, when they were in movement, the focus was on the male. When they were moving, we talked about Abraham, or we talked about, Isaac or Jacob. But it was when the camp stopped that you saw Sarah, that you saw Rebecca and whatnot. So the point I'm trying to make, is that rest is not a passive thing. It, if you look at what happened there, it was a time that those camps regained.
Ron, I don't hear you right now. Ron? Ron, I think you might have muted.
I disconnected the conference line. Give me just a second to reconnect it
Okay.
by mistake.
Okay.
Let me just say while you do that, yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, but that makes sense. Because anytime, the Bible is itself a sort of, in material terms, a description of spiritual evolution of us individually, but also of humanity. So it makes sense, I think, that moving from one place to another place is that sort of straight line from point A to point B, and then resting and building on what you learned is the curved line, the feminine principle in being employed.
Both of which, your point is, both of which are important. Both of which has its function and its role and balance and harmony.
You literally cannot have one without the other. Correct.
Ron, are you back on yet? Thank you, Nick. Well, I'm gonna fill in a little bit until Ron gets on and completes his thought. The human possesses infinite power of procreation. The human possesses infinite power of procreation. I think this relates a little bit to what you were talking about, Nick, earlier. The human has the power to give birth to children, who in turn give birth to children, and so on and so on.
Comes from the.
Hold a second. Pastor, well, some of us missed out on a lot of that conversation because the conference line was disconnected in the middle of Ron's thought. Yeah.
Apologies. That was me.
But that's okay. Ron, just to let you know.
Okay. Well, all I was just saying, I was kind of supporting what had already been said. The example that I saw was looking at the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and
Right.
Sarah and Rebecca. And what I was saying is when they were moving, when the caravans were moving, you always saw the focus on the masculine energy. And when the caravan stopped, is when you saw Sarah go into action or Rebecca go into action. So that rest was not a passive thing. It took both sides to complement the other. And it brought them, it always led to them either something being revealed to them or bringing them back into focus. So that was just an observation that kind of, to me, was an example of what had already been said.
And while you were off the line, Nick articulated that same thing, that was the pattern that the Bible gives us of this movement and rest. So it was all in line with that same pattern. Nick, did you want to say anything else about that since you articulated that thought?
Sure. I think just the more you turn over in your own mind these sort of stereotypes that we associate with men and women, or masculinity and femininity, the more I think you can see the original sort of spiritual root of those stereotypes. Like when we say men are, well, particularly in religious settings or environments like that, when they say men are supposed to be leaders, spiritually speaking, the masculine principle is the one that leads, but that does not mean it is more important. It literally just means it is the one that goes first, and not first in terms of importance, but just first as in the one who deals with the problems before they negatively impact the rest of the sort of people or individuals being led. And individually ourselves, when we lead ourselves in a particular direction with our own sort of masculine tendencies, it's just our own ability to deal with whatever comes our way as a result of moving in a new direction in life, internally, etc. It doesn't mean that it's better than. It's that is the influence of ego and a rejection of the feminine principle within. There is no, it is a level playing field. There's no better than. Anyway, yeah, I'm done.
So each complements the other. Pastor, you were saying something when you came back on.
No, I was just responding to what Ron had said, and now listening to what Nick just articulated. An example of this whole idea of feminine and masculine principles. I know it's very difficult sometimes for some of us to see this separate from a masculine body or a feminine body, because the representation of these principles or the expression of these principles are readily seen so often in this bodily form. However, one of the things that, an example rather, of this leadership of masculine energy can be seen with Cleopatra. It can also be seen with Queen Zinga what's the country? And Angola, when she fought against the slave traders. She was the king of her people, female, but being expressive of masculine energy, because the energy that she's been guided by was a type of energy that led her to protect and provide for her people. So I think that the more we look at actions such as hers and what they actually represent, the easier it would be to wrap our minds around the principles of feminine and masculine energy, as opposed to the physical body forms of this energy. And the reason I'm so I want us to get this so deeply is because there are females, there's feminine energy that's dominant in masculine bodies. And that is rejected as opposed to being embraced. So I think those types of things with King Zinga and with the dominant energy in masculine bodies being female or just the opposite of that, when we can embrace that, it gives us a better picture of what we're talking about spiritually when we speak of manifested a masculine, physical, and feminine energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, good morning, Barbara. This is George. And
Good morning.
the word Abba was mentioned earlier, and what I wanted to do was just, I guess, ask or just try to make sure, we can all have some clarity. When we say Abba, it's basically is referencing the Father, but it has is it a plural where it ends with I or ends with the A? So could that be considered in terms of it being the oneness, where you have both the masculine and feminine energy? But I think the way that we were taught that Abba means Father, but I'm just trying to understand why does it have that Ah sound at the end, which represents feminine energy. So that was just a question I just wanted to put out there in the macro, if anyone has any comments on that. If that
John,
if that makes sense.
George, I haven't looked at that from that perspective, but Abba, I believe, came into the Aramaic language. They used Abba a lot more. The basic Hebrew used Av. So I'd have to look at that in terms of the Aramaic perspective of it. Does anyone else have any thoughts, Pastor?
I looked at it. The Aramaic, when it said Abba, it was a reference to Father, Mother, of the universe. When Jesus, I think it was in the writings of Paul, used the word Abba, it was short for Avum. And it was referencing everything that we have learned that Avum means or stands for. And that is both masculine and feminine. So, but in the translations, what it did, it translated it as being masculine only, when it really isn't. It's both.
Thank you. So, George, looks like the answer was yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really appreciate that, because something came back to my remembrance when actually Sheldon was basically teaching on the Lord's Prayer, and he had mentioned about, Abba, in terms of being the birther, the father, mother of the cosmos. You create all that moves in light, but I think it was Abu Washamaya, but it represents the father and the mother of the cosmos. So again, it came back to my remembrance thinking about what Sheldon taught. So I appreciate just getting some clarity on it. And one other comment, Barbara, and I don't want to stray from where we are, but I just wanted to mention that as we are speaking about the utterances of the Ten Commandments, and again, Ron talked about going back to beginnings. Something that I just wanted to put out there in the macro was I wanted to look at creation in that way, that we can look at primary sources in terms of how creation came about in various Jewish, or in terms of Hinduism or Buddhism, or again, Islam. But in those creation stories, I think primary sources are something that I really wanted to look at more specifically in reference to our African American history, or in terms of Africa. And I was kind of doing a comparative analysis in reference to the 42 laws of Ma'at, looking at the 10 utterances, and it was interesting just to be able to see some of the comparisons But I think more importantly for me was looking at the primary sources of what was predated before we got the 10 utterances or the 10 commandments, and then looking at the 42 laws of Ma'at, as a way of looking at the two. And it was just interesting. So I didn't mean to go off hopefully the subject, but I just thought it was interesting looking at the two and comparing them. I'm done. I'm sorry.
So George, when you get ready to share that with us as a study, you're going to let Pastor know, right? Because you're absolutely right. We're talking about these 10 utterances as if they were just now revealed. But if you look way back in history, there are threads of these concepts of the utterances. They weren't called the 10 utterances, but the threads of morality, threads in civilizations that were much older. So you're absolutely right. So go ahead, Beth.
These utterances that we're talking about, I've tried to stay away from this, and I know why George has as well, is to make every effort to keep watch people from being confused. However, these utterances were in other cultures before they were given to the Hebrews. Before there was a Pharaoh in Egypt who knew not Joseph, these utterances were there, and they were taught to the Hebrews as they were there in Egypt. Keep in mind that the Hebrews were not slaves in Egypt the whole time they were there. They were guests in Egypt. And when the Pharaoh rose who knew not Joseph, that's when things changed. And that the utterances that were given in the wilderness were the utterances that were already there in Egypt in a different form, but the same things. And the Creator was given a generation who knew nothing of those utterances, was given them the same opportunity that those prior to the evil Pharaoh rising to power, they were given the same utterances that the Hebrews had learned prior to the servitude that they were forced into. And I guess that's another lesson for another day. But I would just want to interject that. And George, you don't have to let me know. We just do it whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So the human has this power to procreate, to give birth to children, who in turn give birth to children, and so on. So instead of using the word children, we can say that they have the power to give birth to Elohims, who give birth to other Elohims, and so on and so on. And I think this had something a little bit to do with what Nick talked about in terms of living long in the land. It means that the Elohim's name and function can continue on and on and on. So as having this power, then this is another reason that the mother-father need to be honored, because they're both vessels through which Elohim continually manifests in the physical realm. So the child becomes the adult mother-father, who themselves then become mother-fathers in essence. So when we honor our mother and father, we honor Elohim, the ultimate source of life. But we also honor ourselves as future parents and caretakers, our own selves. In other words, what we're putting into what Elohim poured into us, if we're pouring it into our children, it perpetuates this idea, this knowledge of of Elohim, that we are image bearers of Elohim. If we reject our parents, it's like rejecting our ancestors, and it's also like rejecting our future in a sense. So, because if we reject the power of what the weight of what our parents represent, the father, mother, we limit ourselves in terms of potential future spiritual awareness. And when I say limit ourselves, it's not necessarily limiting ourselves for now, because we all can come to an awareness of who we are at any point in time. But our knowledge in the more immediate future, when we don't understand this relationship. And still one other person. Somebody's got a comment, question? Somebody unmuted.
Yeah,
Yes,
Barbara, I just want, just get nothing new under this. What you just mentioned was actually the 33rd law of Maya in terms of the feminine pathway. It says, I will not act against my ancestors. So when you say honor your father and mother, and we talk about it takes a village to raise a child, I think that all has that substance in there, but you just actually mentioned one of the laws. I just want to connect with you on that. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. A person by the name of Yankee Tauber put it this way, which I thought was interesting, but which resonated. Suppose at birth, and we've already talked about this, before our birth at the divine level, Elohim chooses which body or family or which parents or which situation we are to enter into. Or we've already talked about this. Suppose we choose, and suppose we agree at these divine levels to enter into this world in order to have the specific parents that we have, mother, father, with whatever their specific lot in life are. That whatever that certain thing is, if there's divine and sacred purpose in our lives, she suggests that to dishonor our parents or covet our neighbor's goods is to deny our destiny. And that resonates with me, because if we are given by divine authority, the parents that we have, the mother, father that we have, for a particular purpose and path that we must walk, for particular experiences that we must have in the context of this mother-father environment that's created. And we don't live that path, and we reject that mother or that father for whatever reason. It's like it's like we're saying, I wish I had another mother or father. And there may be children who actually in the physical have said that for whatever reason. But to say that from the spiritual perspective is like coveting, if you will, coveting someone else's parents. And when we do that, what if someone else who has a mother, father, has that particular mother and father, because it's part of their journey of experiences on the path toward their spiritual awakening. And when we say we want that, it's again coveting what someone else has. But what does it say about what we think about Elohim? When we reject the father, mother given to us by Elohim, what does that say about what we think about Elohim, our creator. So, and what does that say about what do we think about our ancestors who came through, who from whom that mother, father came through, and also us? So again, we really have to be careful about what we mean by honoring our mother, father, because the path, the very spiritual path that we are on, is because we were given birth, physical birth, through that mother, father. Does that resonate? Does that make sense? She had a baseline, but I added to that.
I have a
Pastor,
question
you
about that.
cleared your throat. Yes.
What happens with the children who are born to parents who walk off and leave them? I know a kid whose parents, his mom walked just left him when he was 11 years old, and he had to live from place to place and ended up being used by people who deal drugs in the street.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened to kids that like that? Now, don't get me wrong, he's an adult now, and he does indeed take care of his mom. However, I'm sure that there were times when he wished he had another parent other than parents that he was given. How do we approach that?
I'm going to see if there's anyone else who has a comment before I comment.
Yeah, this is Nate. In that situation, you are, speaking of the 11-year-old that Pastor just mentioned, to want other parents is perfectly natural. You are intuitively aware that your entire situation is completely out of balance and chaotic. And acting and employing the masculine principle would be to move to a different situation, or at least be desiring to do so. And then the feminine principle would be learning to adapt to and settle into and be in balance in a new situation. Of course, that does not always get to happen. And you have to, well, you don't have to, but oftentimes feel like we're forced to remain where we are, or we're constantly going through those sort of chaotic situations. But in that case, it would have been a failure to honor your ancestors in order to, or if you had allowed yourself to remain in that situation or in that chaotic state when you realized you had the ability to move yourself out of it at whatever point in life you realize you have that ability. And when I hear, just continuing the conversation about ancestors, is to honor the purpose for which we keep going and keep reproducing physically, and sort of keep existing throughout time in this sort of physical experience. And to honor that purpose is to honor the overall goal of spiritual transformation for all of us. And I believe that is the reason why we, I know we've spoken about that in here, but that's one of the reasons why we continually have children, is to give ourselves more opportunities to find that balance, despite our physical time running out, because we ourselves, individually and collectively, were not balanced enough to have a life long enough that allowed us to find that balance within our lifetime. I'm done.
Thank you, Nick. Pastor, I asked question. I answered the question with a question. what if it wasn't just the case of the child whose parent walked away from them? What if it was someone who wanted a different life, a different place, richer family, the whatever the reason is, it would suggest that we didn't know what path or experience we needed to take. It's almost like it's denying that the Creator knows what is needed. It's not like the Creator didn't know that the parent would walk away. It's almost like and I can't really say anything different other than the Creator has a pathway and experiences that we all have to have in this journey, and they're not all roses, and they're not all a bed of roses. And so, having not known what happened previously in the previous life, it's difficult for me to say that anything other than I have to trust that the Creator understands what the destiny is for each individual, and the path that individual must take on its journey towards spiritual awareness, toward knowing who it is. Other comments?
So
it doesn't mean that individual doesn't do what it can in his power to better himself, to get out of that situation of having lost a parent who abandoned him, and perhaps there are qualities that come out of him that he didn't even know he had, that would not have emerged, that were end up being positive qualities because of what he had to do to overcome that situation.
So the idea of the scenario that I spoke about would be no different than a child who is born with cerebral disease and suffers the whole time it's in this earth and dies at 2 years old. What would be the spiritual reasoning for something of that nature?
I'm sorry, you said 2 years old. I didn't catch the latter part of what you said.
The baby is suffering from disease, some type of incurable disease, and dies when it's about 2 years old, whatever age it is, but it suffers the whole time it's in this earth. Would that be, it would be no different than the scenario that I described? Could it possibly be because these are circumstances that create empathy or bring the empathy out of us or give us opportunity to be expressive of love and kindness? If it were not for suffering of that type, who would we be in relationship to the empathy that we are and the love that we are supposed to be expressing? There would be no stranger. There would be no enemy. There would be no sick, or there would be none in prison to visit. So all of these things that we are experiencing, that we see, and we have empathy for the people who are going through it, could it possibly be that these things are purposely put in our presence, placed in our presence, so that we can respond to them in such a manner that will not only bring empathy from us, but will create more empathy in the earth itself by virtue of sharing it with each other. For example, when I talked about the 11-year-old, I'm sure that there are those who felt for that 11-year-old. If that had not taken place, we would not be having this discussion. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this. The ways of our Creator, the ways of the universe are not our ways. And we don't always understand them. And to question why would the Creator allow this to happen is to actually question why are we allowing it to happen. The reason I believe that it's happening is because we have been and still are so unaware of who we are until there had to be some things to put in our lives to wake us up. There had to be things placed in our midst to shake us like we've never been shaken before, in order for us to dig deep inside of us and be expressive of the empathy that we were created with, or be expressive of the love that we are without regard to who it is. A classic example of that is what happened when we think about people who've been in prison. And I know from working with people who've been imprisoned that there is an attitude from religious people to a people who've been in jail. And that attitude is they deserve it. And we we have had a lot among us have had that attitude that they deserve it. But that is a societal thing. So is it possible or probable that the universe consciously does this in order to push us into a corner that really forces us to take inventory of our perception of those who are the least, or considered the least among us? The kids, there are people on the streets who the church can't stand because they deal drugs. But you don't know the reason they're doing that. And there are those who say there's no justification. But that's because of the shoes you walked in, not the shoes they walked in. There are those who are prostitutes that the church can't stand. Yet, you don't know their story. So all of these things that seems to be distasteful, painful for us to endure are there for us to become more aware of who we are and to give us a depth of pain that will cause us not only to want to find out who we are, but to change things from the way they are so that humanity can live in harmony as opposed to being placed in a condition that is less beneficial than it is to others, or something like that. That makes sense?
Yeah, and you just explained, in a sense, why honor father and mother comes when it comes in the commandments, because it's the basis of relationship. That family is the first base, or that mother-father, or in some cases that mother only, or that father only, depending on the existence into which the child is born. That's the first basis of relationship. The Creator understood that we are going to have to relate to other people at some point in time. If you look at the following commandments on the last 5, those are ways that we can relate to people, or we can relate to them differently, depending on depending on where we are in terms of our spiritual awareness. And so, yes, every experience is a mirror, and even the child that you spoke of with the disability first became a mirror to the parents to show them what was in them, and what that parent or that mother or that father reflected that to that child often can be reflective of what the neighborhood shows or feels about that child, and then hence society, and hence the larger macro. And so the father mother is the basic unit that begins to build on these relationship kinds of experiences that we are going to have not only with them but with each other and with the larger society. And so, yeah, everything has its purpose, and everything is. We've been talking about honoring father and mother, but the mother and the father have their responsibilities as well, while they're preparing a child that can be an image bearer as well. So, yeah, everything relates to showing us who we are, and it pulls out of us, whether it's empathy, whether it's joy, whether it's love, whether it's anger, and we need to deal with that if it's anger, because anger then goes to covetousness, which is the basis of the saying utterance number 10. So you get angry. So anyway, it's an opportunity to see who we are, and I agree with you there. To know who we are, to see what we need to do in order to strengthen ourselves in terms of our awareness of the Elohim that we are.
So what does it mean in a nutshell when it says, honor thy father and thy mother, that days may be longer for the face of the earth?
Anybody want to try that before I do?
Yeah. Honor and balance the masculine and feminine within you and between you, as in all of us, in order to harmonize your experience in the earth and in your physical body, so that you may be able to receive spirit in a balanced way, so that you will have a longer time available to you to learn the lessons that you are intended to learn in the physical experience.
And in addition to that, once we understand what we are honoring and balancing, there is no we don't perceive that we have lack, because we're balanced. We don't perceive that we have lack. If we don't perceive that we have lack, then there's nothing to be jealous about, which then takes us back up that tree, back up the other side of the commandments. We don't have to go that route if we don't perceive that we have lack. So the honoring has to do with all of that, instilling those ideals of what it means to be balanced, to be in harmony with self and with others. Questions? Comments?
So how would you explain that to a kid in Sunday school?
Pay attention to what mom and dad says, because they well, you know what? I would ask the kid, what does it mean? And I would start with what do you know about your mom and father? What do you feel about your mom and father? My father, my daddy, he goes to work and he brings me stuff, blah, 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 blah. Uh, uh, it has to do with respect. It has to do with, let me stop because I'm getting ready to get esoteric and you're talking about explaining it to a young person. Who can do that? Anybody can do that?
No, I'm talking about what is the meaning of that? How would you explain that? Well, it doesn't have to be a kid in Sunday school. It would be anybody who came out of religion. I just walked out of it. I'm trying to understand what this really means from a spiritual perspective because I have been told what it means from a physical perspective that I'm supposed to have respect for my mom and my daddy. And regardless of how they may be, they gave me life, so I still respect them, even though I might not respect what they do or how they treat me. So, but what does that mean spiritually?
Well, I'm with Nick. It's understanding, but I don't know how to. I don't know if I know how to explain it the way you're talking about the masculine and feminine within myself. That I have both, and that there are times when I have to lead, but there are other times when I have to be the strong water in the house. I have to keep the family together and keep things balanced in the home, kind of thing. Somebody else?
Yeah.
Anyone.
And I would say I agree, Barbara. And I guess I would say just honor your own intuition. If you think something is off or you think you need to investigate something, then follow that feeling up and don't deny your intuitive awareness of what's going on.
Let me ask those on the phone. If someone asks you the question, what does it mean, honor your father and your mother? What would you say?
This is Ron. God, that sounds like such a simple question, but as we can see, it's not. My mind is just going, turning, trying to think of just a solution. Something similar happened some years ago with a young man who was extremely close to me at the time, and his dad, for lack of a better word, was a tyrant. And we weren't talking about this scripture, but I was talking to him about respecting the home and some of the things he saw, and I knew that he didn't agree with it. He talked about me. And one of the things I reminded him of was some of the conversations we had, which spoke to me about what was in him, how much wisdom he had as a child, and the understanding that he had, and the love for his mom and some of the things she endured. And I told him that, no coincidence, you feel that way. That came from your parents. And I can't say which part came from your mom and which part came from your dad. But, you have to show him love and respect because he is your dad. And it was a difficult conversation, but I think it kind of registered to him that all the things that he is came from both of his parents. So from that point on, that was a place to begin to understand and establish that type of relationship or a new relationship with his dad. So As an adult now, I don't know what kind of relationship they have, if any, but that was just my experience with that, I guess. It's closer experience is that, kind of relates to what we're talking about here. And I guess that just kind of goes, hand in hand of what Barbara and Nick have said already. But it's not something that's easily answered, I guess, at least not for me.
Well, one of the things is that father, mother gave you life. Now, what happens with that life, even though father and mother poured some things into you, you have an opportunity at some point to make a decision about what kind of person you would be. And that's from the physical perspective. What kind of man you're going to be, what kind of woman you're going to be. Because a child may or may not understand it from the perspective that unless the parent has taught it, that the Creator is the one who gave all of us life. So if you think of it at the physical level, the father and the mother physically were the ones who were responsible for you being born. And some kids will say, "Oh, I wish I'd never been born."
Suppose that is not speaking to the individual mother, father, and the child. Suppose it is speaking to anyone who give you parental guidance. Suppose that it speaks to the concept that some of us grew up with, that everyone in that community has an obligation to correct you. And most of us on this phone grew up with the village raising a child. Suppose that's what is expressive of, as opposed to the individual people. And this whole concept of honor mother and father, speaking to a man and a woman and their children, is a concept that's foreign to the scriptures, because the scriptures are speaking from the mindset of the East. And the Eastern mindset is that it takes a village to raise a child. So that would say that everyone in that village is a father and a mother. So it's speaking more to respecting the parental guidance that you receive from those around you, and this will prolong your life in this earth.
I can see that.
I was starting off the question about how would you ask a child. Going along with Ms. Barbara said, I would just ask questions to the child. What do they think about their parents? What do their parents do? What do their parents mean to them? Things that they're grateful for their parents for, and things of that nature. And it's not just for them to actually just think about it, but in doing that exercise, they're able, as they're speaking and thinking about those things, actually experiencing that gratitude as well. And as Nick was saying, feeling that within. When I think about the word honor, I think of it more so of holding in high esteem, regardless of what that individual may even do physically, so to speak, is having a gratitude and a thankfulness for them, and actually seeing them in a high regard, in high light. Most people know of or have experienced some child, for example, at some particular point that may just to be bluntly, just bad, just super bad. But at the same time, that child may be believing that they're bad and acting accordingly, but you actually seeing a spark in that child and knowing otherwise. The same thing can happen with a parent as well. The other thing I like about the discussion with that question being posed to a child is that, okay, so first of all, that child is, in order to do this, they have to, or to truly do it, they are within themselves engaging, so to speak, this mother-father concept and the different attributes that this mother-father concept embodies. Well, also, while doing that, that also means, or with that action, they're doing the same things with themselves. And so whenever we connect to something on a deep level, so to speak, we are touching in that aspect of ourselves to actually embrace and honor, hold in high esteem the parents. So that child in the same aspect is, in a sense, honoring the parent within them that they're actually discovering or becoming acquainted with. I'm finished.
Michelle? Other questions or comments? Well, we've talked about a lot of stuff today. And we talked about it from many different perspectives. There are some threads that were consistent throughout all of what we were talking about. And it has to do with feminine, masculine energy and the harmonious balance between those two. And when those two energies are balanced, and you introduce a third entity in that balance, then that third entity learns those aspects of what it means to be balanced, or can learn what it means to be balanced. Let's see what you guys think about over the next evening to daylight, evening to beginning of the day, and let's see what we think we come up with in terms of additional comments and questions, which might drive our discussion tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Any parting comments or questions for today, though? Alrighty then. We'll see you tomorrow, 11 o'clock, and we will pick up with where we left off today with questions and answers.